All right, awesome. Thanks, guys, for coming. Of course, I have the post-lunch spot, so hopefully no one will be falling asleep, but I'll try to keep you entertained as much as I can. So I'm here today just to talk about marketplaces specifically. So I've got a couple case studies to go through, some of the things you can keep in mind if you're planning to build a new marketplace, and also talk a bit about my experience at two marketplaces that I've worked at. So first, like I said, so we're going to talk about marketplaces starting very basic and then try to get a little bit more specific as I go through how you can identify a good marketplace opportunity. Then we'll talk about my experience at Bluecart, and we can also touch on some of my experience at Jumia as well. And then finally, how to scale. So there's a lot of different steps that I am working on right now at my current company, and I'll kind of walk you through some of the things that we think about as we do that. So first, let me give you a little bit of background on myself so you know who I am. My name is Kris McKee. I started my career actually in investment banking. I also spent 4 years in international development. I kind of fell into product management, and I think a lot of us do that. It just was something that seemed interesting, and I just kind of kept going for it. I got my MBA in 2014, and then I joined Jumia Nigeria. So Jumia is, if you haven't heard of them, they're the largest e-commerce company in Africa. They started in Nigeria in 2012, and now they're in 17 countries. We raised our unicorn round in 2016. So with that, they've really grown and expanded, and they're doing really well. We're talking about IPO at this time. So I was there at Jumia for 2.5 years as head of operations. I managed the warehouse. I also did a lot of the product management for our internal systems at Jumia, including our vendor-facing systems for our external marketplace. So I can talk a little bit about that in questions, but really I'm going to focus more today on my current role, which is working with Bluecart. So Bluecart is a B2B marketplace based here in Silicon Valley. We focus on the restaurant industry. So when a restaurant wants to place orders for their fresh produce, their fresh seafood, meat, they can come onto the Bluecart platform, and they'll find all of their vendors in one place. And they can place one order that will then get shot off to 10 vendors if they need to. Also, our vendors, of course, can come on our platform and find all their restaurants in one place. So it makes ordering for the restaurant industry very simple. And of course, restaurants have to place orders 3 or 4 times a week. And so that makes our platform very, very sticky. And I'll talk a little bit about this as we go through the slides. But we also provide a SaaS platform. So for restaurants and for vendors, we have a lot of additional functionality that makes them use our system for their everyday inventory management, everyday accounting, operation flow, so actually delivery management as well. So that really brings them into our platform and makes it something that they are using on a regular basis. So we'll talk a bit about that. I'm going to start very basic, and then we'll get more detailed. Also, I think this is super informal, guys. So if anyone wants to jump in, ask questions, maybe even have something to add to the slide, feel free to do that. Okay, so what makes marketplaces unique? So starting at the basic, obviously at the core, of course, the marketplace has a group of suppliers that are providing something to a group of sellers who are buying them. But at the core, what you're trying to do is create efficiency in a market that otherwise is not efficient. So bringing people together in one place so they can fight each other. Very simple. Some of the things that I think are absolutely fundamental in marketplaces, of course, is they're aggregating the sellers and their inventory into one place so that buyers can find them, and there should be a transaction. And we'll talk about this in the future, but transactions are really key because in order for the marketplace to make money, it typically comes out of a take rate on the transaction. So there are lots of different characteristics of various marketplaces. So when you're looking at a marketplace, you're going to ask yourself these questions. Is it a B2B or a P2P or a B2C? So today we're talking mostly about B2B, of course. But it's important to understand those differences. And also in the same vein, looking at whether or not it's an on-demand marketplace, potentially a community-driven marketplace, or a SaaS-enabled marketplace. So Bluecart is SaaS-enabled, like I mentioned, which means we actually bring our sellers in because we give them these other services as well. So some of the metrics, and I'm keeping this very basic because I didn't want to spend too much time on metrics. Obviously, I could do 10 slides just on metrics. But the 3 metrics that you're always looking at for marketplaces are the GMV, so understanding how much flow of orders is going through your platform. And of course, that money doesn't necessarily come to the marketplace itself. This is going from the vendor to the buyer. Typically, the marketplace would make money off of the take rate, which is that last one. So, for instance, for Airbnb, the Airbnb will take a certain percentage. I think it's about 8% off of the cost that the customer is paying. So that's the take rate. And it's really important for marketplaces to be able to find a take rate that's sustainable because that, of course, is their revenue model and what determines whether or not they can continue. And then, of course, it's the average order value as well. That gives you a sense, especially in B2B, this is important, because it gives you a sense of how much of of that business is going through the marketplace. So for Blue Cart, we work for the restaurant industry. Our goal is to basically have every order that a restaurant places comes through our platform. So we have, of course, meat, seafood, and produce, all the very perishable goods. But we are now moving to less perishable goods as well. We even have, Unilever and Kraft Foods. We do paper goods on our platform because our goal is to get all of their ordering coming through one platform. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. All right, so now I'm going to like 2 sections, I guess, with some ideas that, kind of in my experience in marketplaces I've come across. So here are 6 things that you might want to think about when you have a good idea for a marketplace to get a sense of, is this going to work out? Is this going to be sustainable? There are obviously other ideas as well, and you certainly don't need all of these to be successful, but it's kind of a checklist. The more checks you have, the more successful you're likely to be. So, so I'll go through each one of these individually, but high fragmentation in the market, understanding the buyer and seller relationship, having a high purchase frequency, which is one thing I mentioned for Blue Cart. Obviously Blue Cart, our restaurants have to order several times a week. Having a very large total market value, of course, that's your potential. Being a part of that payment flow so that you can take that take rate. If you're not part of that payment flow, like say Craigslist, it can be very difficult to make money off your platform. And then, of course, having a network effect that helps you to grow and scale as quickly as possible. So let's talk about each one of these. So obviously, as I mentioned on the first slide, the goal of a marketplace is to create efficiency within an otherwise inefficient market. So this highly fragmented market is definitely a great market to attack. It's something where these people would not be able to come together without the support of your marketplace. And I'll talk about this a little bit more for Blue Cart, but in the restaurant industry, it was extremely highly fragmented. It still is very fragmented. Typically, restaurants would, meet vendors just by going out to food fairs, or the vendors would come and actually walk around the street to find restaurants that might be interested in their meat or produce. And then they would have a phone number in their phone, and they would contact them kind of the old school way. They actually were still using faxes, mailing invoices, doing things by email, extremely old school. So finding a way to bring all of those people together is a way to, create a marketplace that could be sustainable. Also, the higher the fragmentation, of course, you should be able to charge a higher take rate because it means that the marketplace is more valuable. And then second, you have to really understand that buyer-seller relationship. And for Blue Cart, this is particularly important because that is an industry that has been running for years and years and years. People are very set in their ways. I always joke, as I had a product at Blue Cart, I spent a lot of time with head chefs, with restaurateurs who think that they're fantastic because they've spent 10 years in Italy or France, and quite frankly, they are. But you have to get to know their personalities and how they run their business. And so you have to understand kind of the market that you're working in, spend a lot of time with your customers, and know what they like and what they don't like. So for Blue Cart, a lot of our restaurants, they're fantastic chefs, but they're not particularly tech savvy. So we need to keep things very, very simple. So some of the things that some of our other chefs would actually create things in Excel to replace what Blue Cart does, but that's very limited to those chefs that are also very tech savvy. So just understand what the situation is, and also look at what the relationship has been historically. So in the restaurant industry, it's very much a handshake type of environment. You've been working with this supplier for 20 years, you're not going to stop. And so we had to provide a technology product that could go alongside that existing relationship, because any suggestion that we might completely change the relationship could become a problem. So just kind of understand that market that you're in. If there is ongoing relationships, find a way to slot yourself in it, especially in the B2B space. That's particularly important. And then work from there. And then next, high purchase frequency. Obviously, the higher the frequency, the better. If you only need to go, let's say you're using a marketplace to find, a doctor or a dentist. Of course, you only go to a doctor once a year, hopefully, and so it's not as relevant. And once you get a doctor, hopefully you won't want to change again. So a better marketplace is one that you need to go back frequently. You have lots of different suppliers that you want to find, that the customer wants to find, and kind of encourages them to come back and get to know the marketplace, and then start to spread out into the other features that they might offer. And then, as always, when you're looking at a new market, you want to look at the overall market size. So what's the potential? What's the potential of the overall market if you were to take over the entire country, just to get a sense of what your revenue would be. And then this is a key one as well. So it's making sure that you're a part of the payment flow. So For restaurants and vendors, for instance, they tend to make all their payments by check, and so they would just simply mail it to each other at the end of the month. And so that was a problem for Blue Cart because we want to be part of that payment flow so that we know, how much is being spent and that we can actually charge a take rate on that amount. So we did start adding payments into our platform. It's not required because, like I said, the old boys club wouldn't want to do that. But for those people who are willing to move to the new technology, by offering payments on our platform, it made it a lot easier for them. Vendors liked it because they could get paid faster. And then it allows us to slowly build more and more information of what people are buying, and then we can make money off of that. So I just kind of, network effects as well. So network effects in terms of growth, of course. So this is the ideal thing. So for Blue Cart, for instance, one vendor typically has about 200 restaurants. And so obviously there are lots of different vendors. Some are small, some are large. But so once we get a vendor on board, we can then be expanded to 200 restaurants, which is pretty awesome. It's a big growth. Then each restaurant typically has 10 vendors. So then we get those 10 vendors on board. And then we go to each one of those 10 vendors and we get 200 more restaurants. And that's what you call a network effect. That's how it just continues to grow. Some of the limitations that Blue Cart's had is that some of those restaurants, for instance, of those 200 restaurants, some of them would not be tech savvy. So they would not want to come on our platform. So when we're evaluating vendors, we try to get a sense of what percentage of their 200 will come on board. Are they a particularly new vendor who has all these young restaurants and so we can get 80%? That's fantastic. Or are they an old school vendor who has always been doing it the old school way? We might only get 20%. Those are the type of things that we're looking at because the more and more we can get, the more and more we can scale. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Blue Cart, and feel free to stop me if you guys have any questions. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the things that we've thought about at Blue Cart for scaling our business. So these are my two friends, Jag and KZ. They're the co-founders of Blue Cart. So Jag actually is a big restaurateur, so he's worked in restaurants his entire life. And one thing that he noticed, like all tech businesses, right, what you do is you go in, you find a problem in the market. He noticed that it didn't make any sense that restaurants are still using old school methods for placing orders and receiving invoice and doing their accounting. So they were both at business school together, and they decided to start up Blue Cart in 2012. I'll go through the history first, or I'll go through history, but first let me kind of explain, the business model. So obviously you have buyers and suppliers. On Blue Cart, we allow the suppliers to go in and upload all of their products. Obviously this is a very difficult process because some suppliers will have 2,000 products, and so we do have an operations team to help them to do that. But we upload their products, then the buyers can go online or on their mobile app, place orders, and find the products and place orders. And then, of course, the orders then go to the buyer and the invoices go to the buyer. So it's one easy system. But some of the things I've mentioned before is that because we're able to expand it to the suppliers of the buyers and the buyers of the suppliers, it starts to grow and grow and grow. Also, for both the buyer side and the supplier side, we do have a SaaS platform that keeps them involved. On the vendor side, our SaaS platform does delivery management, so we help them to decide how they want to divide up their products for truck delivery. We also do route management through Google Maps for truck delivery. And then on the buyer side, we do inventory management, menu costing, budgeting, and inventory tracking as well. So all of those things. So we do have certain individuals that will come onto our platform just to use that SaaS product. Then eventually they might want to move on to using orders as well. One thing that I think that's really helpful as well is if you're a restaurant on our platform, you can still place orders to your vendors even if the vendor is not on the platform. And so that's what I guess you would call a one-sided marketplace that allows that to happen. It's a little bit more work, of course, for the restaurant, but that means that if a restaurant comes on and only 2 of their vendors are on our platform, they can still use Blue Cart for all 10 of their vendors, which then helps them for their accounting and their whole workflow. And that's something that can really help your marketplace grow if you can make it useful even if the network effect is not there, because naturally you have to grow slowly to get to the network, for the network growth to be successful. Okay, so I think, touching on that SaaS thing as well, we always joke that people come to Blue Cart for the tool, which is the SaaS, but then they stay for the network, and that's really helpful. So just kind of talking a little bit about Blue Cart. So Blue Cart has kind of had its ups and downs, like all startups, I guess. And so I wanted to touch on some of the things that some of the mistakes potentially that we made, in case that might help you guys in the future. So like I said, Blue Cart started in 2014. In 2014, they were focused entirely on restaurants. The idea was, we saw this problem in restaurants, let's solve it for restaurants. But later on in 2016, we discovered that we really needed to move more towards the vendor side. Because first of all, vendors are the ones who have the most money. They're very large. They have 200 restaurants. But they're also the ones that control the product catalog. So it was very difficult for us to get the buyers to put all their products on their platform. So working with the vendors allowed us to charge more money and have a wider impact also on the network effects, because the vendors have a lot more buyers that they reach out to than the buyers. In April 2017, we completed our Series B, and that's where we focused a lot more on customer focus, on reaching out to customers, understanding what they want. And that's where we started to add some of these additional SaaS platforms, like the inventory management and the marketing. The inventory management and the ordering and the delivery management. And right now, we're actually focusing on revenue sustainability. So before we raise our Series C, it's important that we can prove that our take rate is sustainable. We're also working with very large vendors like Unilever and Kraft, and trying to prove that they are willing to work with us on an ongoing basis, because that proves our viability for revenue. Okay, so the next thing, I'm going to walk through some of the steps that we've thought about in terms of scaling. I hope some of these are helpful for you guys. I think the key question here, and this is something we've debated for a while at Blue Cart, is do you want to start with the buyer side or the seller side, right? So typically people say start with the seller side. At Blue Cart we started with the buyer side, but we realized that was a mistake. But it was incredibly important that you grow on both sides. You can't just have vendors, because then vendors eventually will leave because they're not getting anything on the platform. So it's definitely working with both sides. So like I said, as we discussed at Blue Cart, every industry is different. You need to understand your customers on both sides and then kind of make your strategy accordingly. So, okay, so I've kind of broke this down into, I think, 4 steps. So in general, I'm saying you do start with supply. That is kind of the typical, although it's important to understand buyers as well. So step 1, if you're trying to build the growth of your marketplace. So first, build your supply. So it would be best if you can identify, a unique spot in the market, have your unique suppliers, people who potentially don't already sell online, so that you are offering a service that does not otherwise exist. And then, of course, get those sellers to list on your platform, and then bring in those customers that they can work with. And so one thing that Blue Cart has done, a lot of other marketplaces have done as well, is you may want to even pay to artificially increase your suppliers just to get started. Naturally, there's a period when it's important that you have a lot of growth going into your marketplace, and then once you get to a certain level of growth, then you can, of course, focus more on profitability. And so this is kind of what I was just talking about. Your ultimate goal is having this cycle of supply and demand, where you have vendors coming on who are then bringing more buyers, who are then bringing more vendors, and it goes on, and that's how you get to your overall market growth that allows you to continue on without any issues. So this is your ultimate goal. It becomes self-sustaining, and eventually you're going to have full market control, so winner take all. So how do you create this cycle? Well, that's kind of the big question, right? If this was easy, then everyone would have $1 million or unicorn marketplaces to work off of. So some of the things I've said here, these are just kind of good ideas, but this is the trick that makes this a fun business to work in. So first, of course, understand your market. Look at understand what drives the suppliers, what drives the buyers. Understand your geographies, your customer segments. Understand the differences and target each one of them accordingly. Also, if you need to, focus on non-scalable activities that might help you to grow. So I think, Airbnb once upon a time, actually paid to go in and have photographers come into different places. They would do things that, were not economical, but help them to grow and build their platform. And then, of course, once they get to an economical state, they don't need to do that anymore. Also, throughout the whole process, make sure you're looking at your signals. So obviously this could be a 2-3 year process where you're growing your marketplace and you want to make sure you're going in the right direction. So there you're definitely looking at your NPS, your customer feedback, looking at overall word of mouth, how many referrals are you getting, definitely repeat usage. You know, if a buyer comes in and makes one order, that's great, but you want them to be on there for a very long time. And just looking at overall increased usage and listing from your sellers. So if all of these are moving in the right direction, you know things are going well. If not, then you might want to reorganize. Then step 3, what are some of the things you need to keep in mind when you're scaling? So first, you know, as you're growing, once you've kind of built your core base, now it's time to kind of hone the edges and become a leader in the industry. So trust starts to come into play very quickly, and we're at this point right now at Blue Cart. You know, why should they come to Blue Cart instead of just doing it on their own? Well, if nothing else, Blue Cart, you know, provides extra security so that if there's any issues with their product, they can get refunded. We've also validated all of our vendors, so it gives you that trust and security that they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere. And as you guys know, there's a lot of other platforms where that's super important, and so that becomes important as you grow and grow. Also, support your power sellers. So, I mean, you can't say this enough, that your biggest sellers who are able to bring in my case, you know, 500 buyers, those are, you know, your bread and butter. You need to do everything you can for them. So even if it means, you know, extra cost, for instance, I have an example here of Threadflip that actually gave their sellers specific mannequins to help them sell their products better. Like those type of things are what keep them happy, and of course, really grow your word of mouth. I mean, if you understand NPS, you want to keep those 10s and 9s really, really happy so that they will continue to grow additional 10s and 9s. And then developing an overall ecosystem. So this is something that has been super important for Blue Cart. So this is where integrations come into play. So Blue Cart is a ordering platform, but there's so many other areas that support restaurants and vendors, whether it's accounting or you know, driver management, HR, POS. And so what we've done is created a platform that can really be integrated with any other platform, so that if one of our buyers or vendors wants to customize Blue Cart for their own needs, they can do that. So as you get bigger, this ability to integrate is very important. But of course, you know, there's always there's a debate that will go on. Should we recreate it ourselves or should we integrate? And that's a strategy question that, you know, you guys should decide based on your own strengths. I know at Blue Cart at one time we had planned to recreate everything on our platform, but we have limited resources, and it ended up actually costing us a lot of money. So what we've decided now is we're focusing on ordering. So anything that relates to ordering, we will recreate. Everything else, we will offer an API for integration. So this is a very important conversation that you should get to right as you get to that market growth where you're about to really blow up. And then prevent leakage. So what this means is just prevent people from leaving. As you get bigger and bigger, competitors will come into the landscape. And so find ways to keep people that you know are happy. So just naturally, as you know, if someone's been working with your company for 2-3 years, they're going to start looking around and seeing if there's any more innovation in the market, you know, who's come up. So first of all, you should also be innovating as much as possible, but do things that keep people happy and try to keep them around. So definitely have a good UX. Consider the rating system like Amazon, which obviously makes that platform very, very sticky. You know, you can't recreate a rating system overnight. And so do things to try to keep them with your platform so that you become the market leader. And then also, this is kind of a similar topic, but you know, protect yourself from competition. So yeah, you might want to offer lower listing fees for some of those key headline suppliers that are really bringing a lot of buyers in. You could just find innovative models to keep them on your platform. And then the last one I want to talk about was kind of some of the things you should think about when an incumbent comes in. So one of the things you can do definitely is lower your take fee, particularly for these larger vendors. Also looking at going vertical. So what are some of the other related services that you could also provide on your platform that could allow them to grow, that would, you know, keep your clients at your platform. And then also going out to underserved markets. So one of the benefits that you have for being first to market is, you know, if you've already grown in the large geographies in the States, you know, you can start growing into the smaller ones, and eventually it makes sense, you know, where you are truly the market leader, and that makes it harder for your competition to come into your market. So I think this is my last slide. So just kind of overall, obviously marketplaces are tough to grow. That's kind of the whole point. But the thing is, once you have done it correct and you've grown to that market scale, they're really hard to kill. And that's it. That's my puppy yesterday on Halloween. So, but yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments? Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're starting with a supplier and you're trying to get that vendor to bring on restaurants,
Yeah.
do you get the objection, hey, why would I bring my restaurants onto your platform and expose them to other vendors? And how do you combat that?
Yes, that is a great question. So we've actually decided, so initially when we first started with the restaurants, we allowed all the restaurants to see all the vendors and all the vendors to see all the restaurants. What we learned is that vendors don't like that. So we've actually changed our entire platform specifically for the vendors. And now we do not allow buyers to see vendors that they were not already connected to. So we are not like an open marketplace. You cannot find people on our marketplace. You have to already have their contact information. But once you have their contact information, then you can see everything. And so we have vendors who don't believe us. We'll tell them exactly that. We don't believe them. So we'll have to show them because this is very, very important. But basically, we focus, vendors are our number one priority. So they can only see their own buyers. Unless the buyer has their contact information, they cannot grow. So that's understanding your market. And so the way that the vendors and buyers have always been working in this restaurant industry, they're very protective of their client base. And so we've kept it in their own silo, similar to Salesforce, for instance. Yeah.
So most of the marketplaces, I guess I'm familiar with, most of the familiar with things like Airbnb.
Right. Business to consumer. Yeah.
So what kind of differences do you see as being most important in B2B marketplaces and B2B?
Yeah. So first, in terms of their ability to stick around, right? Because B2B, you end up running your entire business on it. If you do it right, they're much more sticky. They're much less likely to start moving everybody over to another platform. But our sales process is completely different. So we are extremely sales heavy. We have a sales team in all of the major cities. We also have a moving sales team that spends 3 months in different cities. And we actually have to be on the ground and finding the leading vendors. What we end up doing is going to figure out who is like the biggest and best well-known meat vendor in the city. And they have a lot of influence. And so we get them on board, then we get their friends on board, and then we leave. Once we have the top 5, usually it starts to grow on its own in that city. So then we'll leave and maybe come back 6 months later. But so I think another key part is that sales has to be kind of the old school business sales where you're knocking on doors. It can't be just through marketing and like those type of ads. Yeah. Cool. Other questions or comments? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You guys are asking exactly the questions that are what we talk about every week. So we used to have a take rate. We actually got rid of our take rate for the vendors. So our vendors now charge a monthly fee, which is the SaaS product. And we actually made it free for our restaurants. And so we no longer sell a take rate. But we did have one in the past, and the problem is that because we don't do 100% of our payments, so we do offer payments on our platform, but it only represents about 25% for those people who are willing to go through our platform. And so we always have this issue of not knowing really what was sold. And so that's why we ended up going into a subscription fee. So these are kind of the questions that are really hard to answer. And honestly, I don't even have the answer to that. This is something we started about 4 months ago. We're still in kind of the testing phase. We think it's the right model for now, but we might change our mind. Yeah. So, but if you have the payments on your platform, though, take rate is the industry standard, and that's what our investors are expecting. Yeah.
Well, a follow-up question from
that one.
If the restaurants are not able to see new vendors, the ones that they don't already know, what's the motivation for them to do it? Is it really vendor-driven that the vendor tells them to use
Yep.
the platform to buy it?
Yeah. Yeah, there's 3 drives. One is vendor driven. So that's the most powerful because the vendors, like I said, the biggest meat provider in Cincinnati. If they tell you to use the system, you're going to use it. So that's one way. Another way is because we allow buyers to come on our platform and still use the full platform even if their vendors are not on it, that's helpful for them. So basically what the buyer will come and say, I work with these 10 vendors. They're not on the platform. They give us their product catalogs, and our operations team types it all up. Not actually, and then they have everything on one screen, and it makes it a lot easier for them to order. So our UI allows them to place one order that then gets shot off to 10 different vendors, so it makes it super easy to use. So that's the second reason. We have a very easy to use ordering system for them. Then the third reason is the other SaaS things that we provide for the vendors. So we allow, for instance, we can do different logins. So the dairy or the bakery guy can do one place of orders, and then the meat guy can do one thing of orders, and then the head manager can review them all and approve them and send them off, for instance. Or we have an inventory module that's specifically for the inventory guy, who tends to be a junior level person in the restaurant, and we make it super easy. We allow them to put it in the same order as the structure of their kitchen, and so those are the other reasons why they come here. So there's kind of those three things. But again, this is very specific to this business model. It definitely works. But it's hard to replicate that in a different industry because I think it'd be a completely different set of factors. Yeah.
I don't know what the competitive landscape looks like.
Yep.
Do you have to do anything to prevent vendors from using multiple food carts? Like, how do you create that lock-in?
Yeah, so we don't create a lock-in at all. Our goal is to get as many of their customers as possible, but that's all self-reported. We ask them, how many customers do you have, and then we know how many are on our platform. There are times when they use other ones. It's to their disadvantage, though. Because we offer this seamless ordering platform, if they use multiple platforms, and on the vendor side, they would have to update their pricing catalog, their products, on just two things instead of one. So there's always this benefit to be on one platform. And in terms of our competitive landscape, so luckily Blue Cart was the first to market, and so we have 70,000 restaurants on our platform and 5,000 vendors, so that's super helpful. There are small guys coming up. We also have some competitors from like the big, like Unilever, Kraft. They have their own, but they only offer their own products. They don't offer all vendors' products, and so that's where we come in and are able to do well. So our goal basically is to catch the market before any of our competitors catch up to us. Yeah. Anyone else? Cool. All right, thanks, guys.